We are back again at the Pat Stedman podcast interview series. And today we have a very special guest, Trey Morgan of Trey and Leah's Stronger Marriages. Trey, how are you doing today?
I am good, and I'm absolutely honored to be on the show. Thank you for the invite today.
So for everybody watching this, I've been following Trey's stuff on Twitter for a while. Account really blew up. You and your wife's account really blew up because the advice that you guys put out there is really, I mean, it's not only deep, but it's practical, and I think that's like the sweet spot. So Trey, could you tell me a little bit about this business? I mean, it sounds like it's a relationship coaching, relationship counseling business, right?
Yes, we are what we would call marriage coaches. We work because it's what we're comfortable doing, mainly with married people. We work off of a lot of experience things that we did well in our relationship, things we didn't do well, what we've learned, what we've learned not to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have been doing this for about 12 years. About the last 8 years, it has really blown up. I don't know that we went looking for this. This was not, hey, let's be this. It just kind of happened. We decided at one time we would, several years ago, that we would put some stuff on Facebook on marriage, and that page took off and blew up. And then when Instagram came out, our children said, hey, y'all really need to go over to Instagram. That's where everybody's at. And so we did. That blew up even more so than anything we've got. We've got a lot of followers over there. And then we thought we need a presence on Twitter. And so we worked, put in some effort of just putting some good, healthy, practical relationship tips out there. And it has done really well. It's kind of we don't make, it's not a service we're looking to provide in a sense of, we don't make any money off of doing social media, but we do write books, and it does give us an opportunity to go, hey, if you like our social media, you'll love our books. And we feel like our books are kind of like our social media, very practical, very self-help, very, hey, here's some simple things you can do to better your relationship with your spouse, your partner, your fiance, whatever it is. But we enjoy it very much. We enjoy getting to know other couples, and our main thing we do is we travel and speak. We do workshops all over the U.S. We'll be in Massachusetts next weekend. Don't spend a lot of time in the Northeast, so we're really excited about that. But yeah, we do a lot of traveling and we speak to thousands of couples a year about just kind of how to have a healthy marriage.
So, I mean, that's amazing. That's amazing. You told me that you mentioned just now that you just kind of fell into this, but what was the sort of process that got you even thinking consciously about how to improve, marriage? Because that, I think that you know this from experience, but a lot of people don't think in this manner. It's relationships are very unconscious for them, for better, usually for worse.
True. Well, we for one, we're very passionate about it. Always have been. My wife and I married very, very young. We were sweethearts through junior high and high school. We got out of high school. Now, this was the late 80s, and this was legal back then. But we dated for 4 years, and we got married out of high school. And so we were very young. I was actually a couple of years older than she was. She was 18. We got married, and so we immediately knew we had to learn how to do this. I liked her. She liked me. We were learning how to do life together. But we attended every marriage workshop, relationship workshop, family workshop that was available. Every book that somebody would lend us, we didn't have a lot of money back then. We would read a marriage book, and those were things that we started doing early in our marriage, and learning some things. And a lot of it was trial and error. There were a lot of things that did not work for us, things we struggled with personally in our marriage, being so different. And as we grew together. And as we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know that we were educating ourselves like we should. But as we grew, we began to share things that we've learned, that we learned personally in our marriage, that we've learned through other workshops, that we've learned in classes that we've took. And it really benefited other couples. Said, hey, we like this. This was a good class. Whether it was a community class that we did or a class at the church where we were at that we did. But we just, and then about, like I said, about 10 years ago, we were doing just a retreat. Someone had offered, said, hey, would you come do a retreat for us? And we said, we'd like to do that. That'd be fun. We like marriage. And probably closer to 12 years ago. And we finished, and somebody at that retreat said, hey, we're doing a retreat in our community about 2 weeks from now. Would you come do a retreat for us? And I said, can we bring some of the same stuff we just did? Because we don't have a lot of stuff right now. And they said, sure, just bring all the same stuff you did. And before you knew it, we started booking stuff. We really didn't go out trying to sell ourselves, but we started booking stuff because somebody heard us over here and said, come to our church and do this, or come use our facilities and do this. And that's how it took off. And right now we do about 1 to 2 workshops a month. We could do more. We're booked up about 3 years out. We could do more, but it's about all we can do, traveling and everything else that we do. But that's kind of how it got going. It was just a lot of the things, we were very blessed. A lot of the things that we did early in our marriage were things that were very healthy, that we didn't know we were doing right, which was things like attending a workshop or reading a marriage book because we were both frustrated with each other, trying to figure out how do I live with this woman who's so different than I am, and vice versa. But those were some of the things that kind of set our course early in marriage, with how to, we look back now. Were there some things we did wrong? Absolutely. There were a lot of things we did wrong. But were there some things that did right? Yeah, there were some huge things that we were very blessed that we accidentally figured out from allowing other people to mentor us. And we live in a time where, man, people kind of just put it on cruise control in their relationships, and they just think, hey, everything's going to be fine. And if we have a bump in the road, we'll figure something out. And there's not a lot of effort being put into relationships these days. And a lot of people see relationships as, we live in a society that upgrades anything or disposes of things that doesn't work. My TV broke a while back. Man, my parents used to take and get their TV fixed. We'd go test tubes and fix all those things. Now you take it, dump it in the dumpster, and go buy you a new one. My cell phone quit working. You go get you a new cell phone. Everything is an upgrade. If it doesn't work, it upgrades. And in relationships, that don't work that way as well as fixing what you've got. And a lot of people just think, well, we'll just keep upgrading until we find the right one that just clicks. And we just live in a society that has not put that value into relationships as they should.
Well, I think one of the problems with people taking that same mindset and applying it to relationships is that, maybe your TV breaks and it breaks on its own, and okay, maybe it's cheaper, easier to get a new one. But, if the TV breaks because you smashed it, and then you're like, oh, the TV's broken, I better get another one. You go smash the next TV.
Yeah.
People tend to create their problems in relationships or co-create it. So with that kind of being said, I don't know how many workshops at this point you've done, how many couples you've mentored. It's got to be in the thousands, right?
It's in the thousands, and we've probably done 150 workshops. And you never know what you're going to have. Sometimes you have 50 couples, some you have 500 couples show up. So you never quite know what you're going to get, but it has been the thousands. And so we've been very blessed to have that opportunity.
So what do you see? I mean, obviously there's a range of different scenarios that you deal with, but what is sort of the arc, the sort of standard arc that people go through, that ends them up in a place where their marriage is on the rocks?
A very common thing that takes place in marriage is you have two young people, two old people, to whoever it is, people that fall in love. Could be a first marriage, second marriage, third marriage. They fall in love. Everything is so good. You're overlooking all the things that they do that get on your nerves, and you're just really focusing on the things you like about them. And you fall in love. You think this is the answer, this is the key, and it's less about who you marry sometimes than it is about, once you're married, how do you go from there. But the couples get into marriage. After a while, it gets real comfortable. It's like we're not dating as much as we were. He doesn't bring me flowers anymore. He doesn't hold my hands much. She's not flirting with him like he was. And 2 or 3, 4, 5 years down the road, and you got two people that are sharing a house together that are just paying rent and maybe raising kids, but there's no real connection anymore. That drive and spark and connection that they had as new married people is gone, and it doesn't have to be, but it's because they've just not put in really the work. They hadn't put out any effort, and a lot of times it's like, well, I don't know what's wrong with my marriage. I've tried to tell my husband, or I've tried to tell my wife, and instead of educating yourself, sometimes you just kind of get frustrated, and you know, sometimes the best thing you can do is look for some outside help, look for some mentoring, some counseling, some, we've done it, look for somebody to go, how do you do this? But you get a couple that's 6, 8, 10 years down the road, and they go, man, there's just no spark. We don't do anything anymore. We don't go on dates. We're just paying bills and raising kids. And, there's no sex life. There's no intimacy involved. And your soulmate's turned into a roommate. And that's kind of how so many relationships work today. And I know you, on our Twitter and our social media, you hear us talk a lot about, you got to put in the work. And some people go, man, that sounds like a lot of work. Well, it is. It's effort. You can't just, for too long, too many people have thought we'll just cruise through a relationship. Nobody has a great marriage by accident. It takes work. You're going to have to put in the effort, and it's going to be even more work when the kids come along.
Yeah. It's it's very interesting to see this transition from the honeymoon phase, and then when you get to around the 2-year mark, all of that new relationship energy, all that overlooking of the flaws, like you said, it just starts to decline, and then people hit this doldrums. And it seems like within relationships, if you can't extricate yourself from those doldrums, then the relationship either collapses or it may continue on, but it's not going to be rewarding. It's not going to be something that you're really excited about. And I guess it's this, you have people in the honeymoon phase, the other person, you guys are both fantasy projecting onto each other, and everything's incredible. But then you get to this next point, and you are expecting the other person to continue to give in like they did in the honeymoon phase. And so when that's not happening, it's like the other partner starts to shut down, and it becomes this sort of ego game, this sort of resentment, like that you're not doing what you used to do in the beginning. Well, you're not doing what you used to do in the beginning. Well, I stopped doing that because you stopped doing that. I thought,
It's true.
So this is what, I think you're more adjacent to it than really in it, but the red pill community, I'm not sure how familiar you are.
A little bit. I hear about it a lot, but I don't spend a lot of time working with it.
Yeah. Well, there's this big, I think this is something I really want to pick your brain on, because the big takeaway, I'd say the fundamental takeaway from the red pill stuff is that women, once a woman gets you, then she stops desiring you if you're kind of too available. And so a lot of the red pill mindset towards relationships is to, okay, she wants to have sex with you less, so the issue is desire. And so you've got to amp up your desirability. You got to get in better shape. Maybe you got to put yourself out there, raise your status. Maybe even, some guys will say flirt with some other girls, kind of create some competitive anxiety. What do you think about that in long-term relationships? Do you think that's a constructive way to go about it?
I think that's a really bad way to go about it. That's just my opinion. I'm pretty traditional. I'll be honest with you. To me, if Lee was here, she would tell you the most attractive thing about me, and the most attractive thing about Lee is that she desires me, and that I desire her. And it's not I don't want to desire her too much, or she's not going to want me. It's really kind of the other way around. It is I'm going to put out the effort to do things for her and to be a really, really good husband. And she is in turn going to want to have sex with me. She is going to want to be intimate with me. And that is a very common thing to do. And to me, when people say, hey, ignore your girlfriend and she'll like you better, I'm kind of like, you want to ruin your relationship, ignore your girlfriend. I'm more of the other community that says, hey, if you'll treat her like a queen, she's probably going to treat you like a king. And that's kind of how the goal works in marriage. And as you mentioned it a while ago, you were spot on. You get into lots of relationships, not just marriage, but in long-term relationships. We call it the stage where all of a sudden you're kind of in checkmate. It's a stalemate, and it's where I'm not going to do this for her until she starts doing this for me, and she's not going to do anything for me until he starts doing some things for me. And at some point, what somebody's got to do is step up and go, I'm going to move my chess piece and quit being in a stalemate. I'm going to start serving my wife, or I'm going to start serving my husband, because the natural instinct is when I do that in my relationship, they're going to automatically respond with kindness in the same way. I met a lady years ago, actually in our first book, we wrote about her a little bit, but she had, after 13 years of marriage, she's done. And it was terrible. It was a horrible marriage. They were roommates. He didn't like her. She didn't like him. They had moved way past any kind of stage in marriage where they got along. He didn't do anything for her. She didn't do anything for him. And they both looked at, if you were to ask him, what's wrong with your marriage? He would say her. If she would just start doing this, it'd be better. You ask her, what's wrong with your marriage? So she wanted out of her marriage, and she went and visited with a counselor. And she said, my reasoning on going to the counselor was not to how to fix my marriage, but I wanted to leave in a way where he realized what he lost. I wanted it to hurt when he left. I wanted him to go, oh, what have I done? And I could see where she was coming from. And the counselor told her, said, go home and for 30 days, said just 30 days that's all you give it. Love him, serve him, care for him. You be the most amazing wife that there ever has been in the history world of the world. If she throws her hands up, says, no way, I don't want to do that. He responds with just 30 days. And when you leave, he'll realize what he's lost, and it'll crush him. And she said, I like that idea. So she goes home. Yeah, she's like, man, that sounds great. I'll do it. She goes home, and she's telling me, she said, man, first 3 days were horrible, absolutely horrible. But I stuck with it. And 10 days and 14 days and 21 days and 30 days. She said, I actually ran into that counselor at a grocery store about 3 months after our conversation. It was 60 days past the 30. And we were kind of off by ourselves. And he said, how did it go? Did it crush him? Did it kill him? Did it work like we schemed? She said, it didn't work anything like we said. After about 10 days, he actually started kind of being nice to me. And after a couple of weeks, he was kind of doing as many nice things for me as I was for him. Said in 30 days, it was like my old husband was back, that I had fallen in love with. And she said, we're 90 days into your ridiculous plan, and our marriage is as good as it ever has been. And it was, her point was sometimes somebody's got to make the first move and just go, hey, it's not about, I'm not going to do this until they do this. It's about, I'm going to start loving and serving whomever it is that I'm in a relationship with hopes that they'll realize, hey, they're very blessed and we have a blessed marriage, and they'll naturally respond to that. Does it always work that way? No, it doesn't. But many times it does. And a lot of people are willing to give up before they're willing to try anything.
Yeah, so I love the response. I was trying to set you up for set you up for the answer that you did. The this is one of the issues that I've kind of had with the red pill of late. You know, I break it down as this distinction between desire and comfort. And I think the red pill guys are very obsessed with this idea that the woman doesn't desire them, and that's why they're not having the kind of relationship that they want. Whereas it's really, if she wouldn't be in a relationship with you if she didn't already desire you, like most likely. Now,
True.
exceptions, of course. I'd say maybe 20% of relationships is maybe not the case. Maybe the guy's really gotten out of shape. Maybe he's down on his luck. You know, maybe he's allowed himself to be really disrespected. He's kind of emasculated. And in those scenarios, the guy maybe does need to step it up in that department. Maybe it's a little bit of a shock therapy, get her to realize what she has. But even in those cases, you're still going to revert back to what you just said, which is that, well, if you actually want to turn the relationship into a good relationship rather than just sort of have the upper hand in a power dynamic, you need to start operating as if the two of you are a team and as if you love that person. And I think when it comes down to it, the problem with a lot of this kind of current wave of relationship advice is that it's reactionary, and it comes from a real sense of pain and disempowerment and fear. And so, you know, and that's why you have most of the guys who are talking about it, how to have a, you know, successful relationship, not even married, you know, because they come in with this assumption that, well, marriage doesn't work, therefore the way I'm going about doing things is the correct way, because it allows me to get some intimacy from women without having to, you know, put myself at risk. And I admit that, you know, there's a lot of interesting things that you learn from this sort of exploration of these different dynamics, and I've gone through the whole thing basically. But what always for me was interesting was people like, you know, yourself, Trey, you and your wife. And you know, you can look at all this stuff and you can say, yeah, okay, theoretically maybe this makes sense, but then you look in practice and you see, well, what do the relationships that actually work do? Because there's this thing in the red pill that you can't, you know, well, marriage isn't going to work. It's like, okay, well, what about the marriages that do work? Well, they don't count. They're exceptions. Okay, well, why are they, let's just say, fine, they're exceptions. Why are they exceptions? What are they doing that makes them work? And you know, it's like this really big cognitive dissonance, because if you start to acknowledge that actually, yeah, you can not only make the marriage work, but you can make it pretty fantastic. What happens to the whole house of cards, the whole ideology?
Yeah, and that is you're spot on with that. And are there marriages out there that are unhappy? Absolutely. But are there marriages out there that are fantastic? Man, there are. And we meet so many people who say, we've been married for 32 years, or we've been married for 18 years, or I talked to a lady today, been married 36 years. She said, it is amazing. She said, we couldn't imagine. And you know, if I'm looking for financial advice, I'm going to ask somebody who has financially been successful, not some guy that's also trying to get finance. You know, ask the guy that's been there. I mean, why would you ask somebody who hasn't been successful at this on how did you do it, on whatever it is that you're looking for? And so, marriage can be incredible, and do about 45%, 47% of marriages end in divorce. They do, and many of those are the second and third, but there are a lot of long-term, healthy, strong marriages. You know, half of the people out there in our nation are obese, but that doesn't mean that you have to be. You know,
Trey, that's like, yeah, I literally said that.
I mean, I'm not being mean or anything, but I mean, I'm just simply saying, just because half the marriages end in divorce doesn't mean you have to have one of those, you know. And there's a lot of things that statistically that you could go, well, this doesn't work because only half of it works. Yeah, but man, that half is really, really good. So, you know, don't give up on that, you know, at least check it out. But yeah, I think in time we'll find out the red pill stuff is just not, it just doesn't give you fulfillment. It's not going to bring about Can you get sex? Absolutely. Can you get have a girlfriend, a woman? Probably. Can you have a connection with some? But you're never going to have real intimacy. You're never going to have true, real intimacy with that kind of relationship, a red pill relationship with women or a woman. You're missing out on the good stuff, which is the oneness and the intimacy of this is who I want to live with for the rest of my life, and I'll do whatever it is that it takes to make it work.
So getting intimacy requires a level of vulnerability. So talk about that in a relationship. How does a man be vulnerable in a relationship?
Well, the world is looking for sex. A lot of the world is looking for sex, and sex was created to be very special. And sex is one of those things that intimacy is one of those things, and you can be intimate in other ways than sexually, but you've got to have some vulnerability, and that's opening yourself up to being willing to take a risk on someone else, to be vulnerable and open. And men don't like that word. I don't like that word. My wife uses that word all the time when we're doing workshops. And I've told her, I said, you talk about vulnerability. I don't like the stuff. But I also know that if I want my relationship to be what it needs to be, then I have to be vulnerable. I have to do things like communicate with her or share things with her that I really think or are on my mind. I have to be vulnerable about everything. To us and to me, relationships work best when you're open about everything, and that you just don't get any more vulnerable than that.
So is there a way that guys need to do this though? Because one of the things, and I just crapped on the red pill, but now I gotta, like, it exists for a reason, because you have a lot of guys who were told, well, you got to be, open, share your feelings with women, and then women just kind of eat them alive, and they just go and go off with some other guy who maybe doesn't treat them very well. And so a lot of guys come into relationships with this sort of scars, and if you act weak to a woman, she pulls back. So where is this line? How do you communicate as a man your feelings without coming across as weak and without your woman looking at you in that way?
Well, to me, if I was talking to somebody who was looking for a relationship or someone to connect with and trying to figure out how, I would first tell them the best thing you can do is to be yourself. And the reason is because if you meet someone and you pretend to be something you're not, you're going to have to play that role for a long time. And at some point, they're not going to like that when they find out that's not who you are. The other thing is if you're constantly finding women who are just trolling from one guy to the next and you can't seem to find one that connects with you, you may be looking in the wrong place or for the wrong type of woman, one of the two. But if you can be yourself and you can build a friendship, and I think, that to red pill people, that will make you vomit, but you build a friendship with someone and you become friends with them with the idea of getting to know who they are and be friends with them, build some common interests of things you like to do together and have fun together. That's where relationships really begin to get good and strong and vulnerable and intimate, is when you build a friendship. In fact, the best way to build a good marriage is to find someone that you fall in love with as a friend and build a great friendship, and then fall in love with that friend and marry them. Marriages that are built on friendship and common interests are the best kind. And so, if some woman goes, hey, I don't like who you are, man, she's not the one you want to hang the rest of your life with anyway. Go find a better one out there somewhere. Be yourself, get to know somebody on a personal level, get to be friends with them, and build off of that. Sometimes too many people are looking for a relationship, meaning they walk into the room thinking, who can I have a relationship with? And maybe what you need to do is go, hey, who can I build a friendship with this time today, and go from there, versus instead of who would I like to sleep with, or who would I like to build a relationship that might be here tonight. You look at it from a standpoint of uh, building a friendship first, and you get a whole lot better relationship than you do if you look at it from the other way around.
So the friendship angle is definitely going to trigger a lot of guys. Let's dig into
It is.
Let's dig into that. So is there, reconcile this, let's be friends and then get into a relationship, with this phenomenon that guys have of the friend zone, and that, you know, they try to be close and friendly with a girl and be there for her, and then they don't get, you know, she's off with somebody else, and she's maybe will talk to them, and, you know, you're such a good friend, but then she's off dating some other guy.
It happens. I mean, that is life. But there's going to be a connection that you make with someone that they're going to like the friend zone, and the friend zone is going to become more than just a friend zone. It's going to become a relationship zone. So many of the relationships right now they're so shallow. They're built on physical needs and physical. Oh, she looks good or he looks good. And one of the best things is, what does the person look like on the inside? I mean, is this a kind person? Is this a nice person? But that friendship goes back to, do I like to spend time with this person? Can I go hang out and play putt golf with this person, or go play golf and have a good time with this person, and let it build from there, versus thinking I got to just jump right into the relationship. Can you move a relationship quick? Absolutely. But sometimes you can move it too quick when you walk in and just kind of go, let's skip the friendship part. If the only thing you're looking at from relationships, the only thing you're coming into relationships looking for out of it is what I can get out of it. What is this going to do for me physically? How is this going to make me feel? You're just going to go from one to the next.
So I've talked about this concept that there's actually two types of friend zones. And one of the friend zones is this sort of classic, you know, as they would say in Red Pill parlance, the beta. And the other one is like the guy and the girl are actually really good friends. They're actually really good friends. They really get along well. The guy is really, really meaningful to the girl. And, you know, those second category of friendships, those friend zones, have, like, if the girl were to lose him, she would be really crushed by it. And I've noticed that a lot of these actually can move into relationships, the former can't. When we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about it. And I think one of the major issues with the friend zone, as it's commonly understood, is that guys who are actually, like, in the friend zone with a girl and who are trying to get her, and, you know, but, you know, she's off dating other guys, what happens is that the guy is actually not stating his own interests. And he's also a little bit of a doormat, and really has an agenda. So he's trying to be nice. Like, if I'm nice, if I'm her friend, then she's going to like me. It's not really being authentic, where the guy would be willing to say to the girl, challenge her on stuff, even if she was, you know, going to date some stupid guy, to call it out and to actually say, why are you dating him? He's an asshole.
Yeah.
You know?
He's being a jerk. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're onto something.
Like, there's this sort of guy who's a friend is like, he's scared to actually fully express himself, and there's an inauthenticity to it. And so I think it's an interesting conversation. Is she really, you know, between the asshole and the nice guy, because she wants the asshole for, she always is going to want the asshole for this thing, or always want the nice guy for this thing? Or is it really just that both are kind of not showing their full self, so she's trying to get a complete person through two separate individuals?
Yeah, and I don't know that I've got a good answer for that, other than I agree with what you're saying. There's two kind of friend zones, and at some point, if you're friends with someone, you're going to have to let them know, I'm interested in you. I would love to get to know you better, and not just I want to be your friend. That goes back to your vulnerability again. And they may very well go, I am not looking for a relationship with you at this time. I'd rather have you as a friend. And that may be the case, and that's kind of how life works sometimes. But you've got to find yourself in a situation to where you're going to have to put out some effort and let that person know, I want more out of this relationship than a friendship.
So the honeymoon phase is obviously this super exciting period, and a lot of people, as they get, as they go through the doldrums that come maybe years later, they're the idea is constantly like, how do I get back to the honeymoon phase? How do I go back to how it was? Can you go back to the honeymoon phase? Is that possible in a relationship?
Absolutely. I feel like it is. There's a lot of ways that you can do that, and a lot of times that you can do that. I know this sounds crazy, but with a little bit of work and a little effort put out, you could go back to a honeymoon stage. You take a couple. If you're looking at a couple in a long-term relationship, long-term, or a married couple, just spending time alone together, taking a trip together, just kind of igniting that friendship of spending some time together is always a healthy thing. One of the things that we find in long-term marriages, there's actually a peak in a divorce rate at about 24 years, 26 years of marriage, which forever people just said, that's really weird that you'd wait 20 something years and then there's a peak. Why is there a peak? And well, it's because it's called empty nest.
Yeah.
And what has happened is you've got a couple that has spent 26 years raising kids, and they have not been husband and wife. They've just been mom and dad for 26 years. And the kids, their whole world is revolved around raising kids. The kids have moved out. The last one goes to college, and they look across the table at each other and go, we have got nothing in common. I don't really know who you are outside of a relationship with my children. And so many people have empty nest and empty marriage when they get to that point. But what you also find is you have couples who have continued to date throughout marriage, who have continued to flirt while they had their kids. They were affectionate. They took trips together. They continued being husband and wife while they had kids in the home. Those are the ones that last kid leaves at home. And so many of them will tell you, it's like we're honeymooners again. We can't keep our hands off of each other. Nobody wears clothes around the house anymore. It's just, you've got couples that to get to this stage, and it's like, we've been doing it for 21 years while kids were in our home, and now they're out, and now we're doing it all the time. Versus a couple who goes, we hadn't been husband and wife for 20 something years, and now we got to figure out how to do that again. It goes back to doing all the things you used to do early in your relationship. You fall in love because you're holding hands, you're flirting with one another, you're going on dates, you're telling each other how pretty they are or how handsome they are. You get married, and so many of those things stop, and you got to go back and keep doing those very same things again. The things that won him or her in the first place are the things you got to do all the time. You don't stop just because now they've got a ring on their finger. I don't have to send flowers anymore. Keep sending the flowers. Keep taking her on the dates. Those are all things that get you and keep you in that honeymoon stage.
How does the sex change? Does the sex get better as you get later on in a relationship, or is there a certain level of novelty and excitement that you can never get back?
If it's done right, it should get better. In fact, most of your folks in your long-term marriages will tell you it just gets better every year. Now, we're not talking folks that are in their 70s and 80s and struggle with intimacy sexually at that stage, but we're talking couples that have been married 20, 30, 40 years, and it's as good or better than it ever was when it's done right. It doesn't lose the novelty. It actually gets better. Instead of becoming boring, you've kind of learned how, what your spouse likes, what that person that you have been with for 26 years likes, and you're willing to explore more. You're willing to try new things. when done right, marriage, sex and marriage should get better. We hear people all the time go, well, I'm not going to get married because the sex will stop. Statistically, married people have more sex than single people have.
Yeah.
And are there times in marriage where things are tough? Oh, there are. When children come and you got small kids in the house, you got multiple kids in the house, there are times when it gets a little tough and you have to work extra hard to keep that spark in your sex life, both a husband and a wife. But there is so much power in the act of sex and marriage that, for years we just thought that it was the cherry on top. It was the pleasure. It was a little bit of fun. This is what it's all about. We get to have a little fun. And it wasn't until a little bit later in marriage that we realized how much power was involved in the act of sex in marriage, that it not only connected you, but it continually reconnected you over and over and over as husband and wife. When that oxytocin and dopamine and different things are released in your body the way that it's created to be.
I think a lot of the problem that guys have is that there's like sexuality today has become so much about, it's been so mechanical, or it's been frankly kind of like pornographized. It's like it's very extreme. And so like there's people who have intimacy blocks can't get to this level of connection where they can actually have this sort of really deep and satisfying sex. And so they hit that wall and then they think, well, can't go deeper than that. And so the only way to go around it is like maybe to get really kinky, or maybe, sleep with other people, and you start to go down this whole other spiral, which tends to destroy the intimacy that existed before. I think that a lot of the mindset that guys need to break is like in the honeymoon phase. The one thing that I would say is different is that everything is totally new, and you can't. It's like the first time you ever had pizza. You're never gonna have like what's that first memory of like the best that pizza. But if you really enjoy it, you get to build on it more and more and more. And I think a lot of it has to do with guys' neural circuits, like dopamine addiction and not enough oxytocin, that they're wired actually to get arousal from novelty and anxiety even than they are to get aroused from connection. And it really, you start to look at this more and more, and you start to think like we really are pretty sick as a society at this point.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. I think you're spot on. I think things like pornography has given us such an unrealistic view of what sex is supposed to be. You've got people with amazing bodies doing incredible things in incredible positions that are just absolutely unrealistic, that are unbelievable and unreal. And you go into any relationship thinking it's going to be like that. Or you've been turned on by that so much that you go into a relationship and you struggle to get turned on without something like that, the novelty of pornography. It is interesting that one of the top 5 reasons for a sexless marriage, which is by statistics, a marriage that has less than 6 times sex 6 times a year is called a sexless marriage, that one of the top 5 reasons for a sexless marriage is pornography. And it fits exactly what you were saying, that we become people who have been desensitized by, we've just seen so much and everything else that it takes a lot to turn us on, or we have to think we get really weirded out. But I'll bring back the pizza point that you made. I've been eating pizza for 50 years. It was great the first time I tried it, but I had pizza this past week and it was fantastic. I hadn't got tired of it yet, and it's the same way with marriage. It was good when it started. Sex was great with my new bride. But sex is just as amazing now. And now we actually understand what we're doing versus newlyweds when you're like, I don't know what's going on here, but you get much better at it as you go. But it's one of those things that you do right, it should get better.
Yeah, and I think that something that's very overlooked from people when they're assessing the sex potential in a long-term relationship is that they forget that what really allows a woman to open up sexually is trust. And so there's so much about, novelty and mystery and how that plays into a woman's arousal. And I'm not going to deny that there's elements of that. Sure. Maybe it's a different circuit, but sure, it's there. But ultimately, if you want to access all this stuff within a woman, she needs to feel like a really deep trust and connection with you. And I think because guys don't know how to go there, that's when they divert and try to find these other ways around it. The only way out, though, is through. And so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, let's talk a little bit about these emotional issues, because it seems to me that we have this paradox of men being simultaneously weaker than they've ever been, but also, and I mean, this is more controversial, but I think if you read like memoirs or love letters from soldiers in like the Civil War, for instance, you start to come to the conclusion that even these men actually had a much stronger emotional range too than guys today. So guys today are both weaker and more emotionally repressed. And I think that there's this big narrative that like guys used to be really emotionally repressed, and I'm not sure to what extent that's true. Is there a connection between these two things?
I don't know that there is. I think it's very possible. I think I think men today, a lot of men are that way. Men have a lot of pride. Uh, that it's just how we're built. We're very prideful people. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be turned. Nobody wants to be turned down. Nobody wants to get their door slammed in the face. They don't want a woman she broke up with me. I didn't break up with her. And so we find ourselves not wanting to be vulnerable. We're not willing to take that chance. We're not willing to get hurt. And if you base all your relationships on that, you're going to struggle to find a meaningful relationship because real relationships about being trustful and being open and being honest, and that's things that are turn-ons to women. They find that as an amazing thing, where men really are uncomfortable being that. Women, that's things that help build intimacy with a woman, is when you're open or when you're honest and when you're shooting straight and you're trustworthy. Is a whole lot more than somebody who is you know, she doesn't think I can trust him. He's never willing to shoot straight with me. He's never open with me. He's not vulnerable with me. And I think pride has a lot to do with it. We've just come back to people who we just don't want to open up for the fear of getting hurt. Or, as men, we don't only want to not get hurt, but we don't like to admit we're wrong or that we even have a problem. One of the men are the last to reach out for help. Women will ask for help long before men will in dealing with just marriages themselves, or just relationships themselves. You'll have a woman who's kind of a wife, a marriage is struggling, and you'll have the woman who is asking, hey, can we get some help? Can we look for some mentors, some coaching, some professional counseling? Can we go to a workshop? Can we read a book together? And for years, the guy will go, there is nothing wrong. Because you're talking about this, is you're the one bringing it up, and it's just making it worse, thinking that if we just ignore it, it's going to go away. And then 2 or 3 years down the road, she finally gets fed up and says, hey, I'm done. I've been asking for 3 years to make this better, and I'm out of here. And then all of a sudden the guy steps up and goes, okay, I'm ready to go to work. And we meet those guys all the time. And pride gets them because they have waited and they've waited and they've waited. And then when she finally goes, I'm done, he finally says, I'm ready now. Why is she not willing? She's been willing for 2 or 3 years while you have been going, nah, I don't want to be open. I don't want to be honest. I don't want to get help. I don't want my pride to get hurt. We've got to be people who are a little more vulnerable and a little more willing to seek help. In fact, to me, the most amazing men out there are the men who will go, this guy knows more than I do about whatever subject it is, making money, business, fitness, nutrition. I'm going to go talk to him and learn something, because those are the kind of guys that I want to hang out with, are people who are willing to learn, not people who are willing to just kind of go, well, we'll figure it out as we get there. But yeah, the emotional thing, men aren't very good with that. And it's really something we've got to do better with. Part of it's pride.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to humble yourself if you have a problem. They say pride goeth before the fall.
That's right. That's right.
So let's go a little bit more granular here. So within a relationship, what do you find that women do that, because I'd be asking your wife this if she was on here. What do women do that starts to destroy the intimacy in relationships? What are some of these things that men can see that a woman's doing? Why does the woman do it, and what can a man do to try to stop it from happening?
Well, a lot of times what takes place in a long-term relationship is you'll have maybe you've got a woman over here who is saying, hey, we've got a few things we need to work on. And instead of being encouraging and going, this would make our marriage so much better, this would make our relationship so much better, can you imagine how good things would be and we could be doing this and this? Instead of using the positive side, many women are really, really good at kind of coming across sometimes as a mother, a little on the nagging side, a little on the critical side, which is a huge turnoff to men. The last thing I want to do is to be married to my mother. And I don't want her, scolding me or telling me. And that kind of hurts my pride when I feel like that is the case. But yeah, as a man, it's a huge turnoff to have a woman who's just constantly feeling like they're being critical and they're nagging and nagging. Lee tries to tell wives in workshops all the time, if you want to help change your husband, if you want him to be a better person, catch him doing things well, and brag on him. That will help change him more, or help him to realize more what he's doing right than criticizing is ever going to do. We, as men, we're like it or not, we're motivated by people going, well done, you did good. That's just something God's created men to be. You brag on us, and man, we're there. And when a woman starts bragging on her man about being an amazing dad, or a guy who does this well, or catches him, hey, as silly as it sounds, thanks for loading the dishwasher last night, instead of going, you missed a glass. Mm-hmm. Work off of the positive instead of off the negative. Besides, that's what you did pre-marriage anyway. We talked about it earlier with things that you fall in love, and he falls in love with her because she's always bragging on him, thinking he's really awesome and telling him good things. And sometimes once you're married a while, you overlook those good things and start griping about all the things you don't like. And so, yeah, the negative. Now, how can men change that? One of the best things you can do is, and we've worked through that in our relationship. One of the best things you can do is communicate, hey, I'll do better on this, but I would do better with this if you'll explain it this way. Or, for example, my wife personally, my wife is a glass half empty girl. She will tell you that. If she was here right now, she'd go, I'm a glass half full guy, meaning I see the positive in a lot of stuff. She tends to be a little on the more negative side. And so she notes, hey, when we had kids clean the room, and I'll walk in and go, man, this looks awesome. And they've worked their butts off. And she'll look and go, there's a sock in the corner, and I'll go, hey, you can't do that. You can't focus on what they did wrong. At least notice what they did right first. And so one of the things men are, again, pretty rough at and not as good at is communicating what works and what doesn't work. And when a man can step up and go, hey, yeah, I realize I left this down, and you're probably going to have to tell me again. But if you tell me in a less critical way or a little bit nicer way, it would sure help a whole lot. But that's men don't often. They just think women should know. Women oftentimes think men should just know, and it doesn't work that way. You got to communicate what you feel, or it's not going to work.
Yeah, I think something that you should sort of express there, which is really important. When a woman is critical about something, I think what a lot of guys will do is they'll get super defensive. And once the guy gets defensive, then the woman doesn't feel heard. And then it starts this cascade of breakdown in communications where she's now going to nag more and push more. And the guy's going to pull back more. And so she's now getting less of the intimacy and affection that she wants. So it's very important that even, that when there's a criticism, to always acknowledge what the truth is in it, even if the delivery is bad. You can address the delivery, but to acknowledge when you're wrong anyway. And that's a difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing.
It is. And again, for guys, that's a difficult thing to do, is to go, yeah, you're right. I wish you would have said it in a nicer tone, but you are right about this.
Now you've had thousands of couples through your workshop. And so I'm just curious, would you say that on average women tend to be the more negative party than the man?
I think women are better at relationships than men are. Women are just created more relationally than men are. But I do think it is a natural tendency for women to be a little more critical than men are. Men will overlook things. Now, sometimes you'll have a man with a personality that's very critical, and so it's not always that way set in stone. But I think generally speaking, most of the time, your women are it's the mother figure. It's the natural instinct of just being motherly, and they can come across as very critical sometimes, and sometimes they don't even realize it. For a period of time when we were working through some stuff in our marriage, Lee would say, "I want you to tell me when I'm being critical." And there would be times where I'd go, that was really kind of, and she'd go, I didn't even realize that was critical. So what I think may be critical, she may not see as critical at all. And so when you can voice those things, it helps your partner to kind of know, hey, even though I don't think this is very critical, if they see it this way, then I probably need to use a different tone or try something a little bit different. But generally speaking, it is going to be your women who tend to just a lot of times be a little bit more critical than the men are. Maybe they just speak their mind more than men do.
Yeah, I'm wondering also, I mean, is there a correlation in your experience with women nagging and being more critical, with them also feeling less emotionally safe or grounded at that moment?
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. Not always. That's not always the case. There are times when women can just be critical. But a lot of it has to do with them not feeling heard, or maybe they have asked you to do something in the relationship or expected you to do something in the relationship and it didn't get done. And so their natural response is, I'm going to be critical because I'm frustrated and I'm upset. And so my natural instinct is criticism.
Yeah, you said something there that was very interesting about how she expected you to do something. And it seems like one of the really big things that you need to overcome to have a successful relationship is to drop expectations.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
You go into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I say something about that? We're bad, especially men and women are really bad about, we call it unmet expectations. And that's just where you expect that your partner's going to do this or that, and they don't, and then you're frustrated. You didn't communicate to them that's what you were expecting, but it was unmet because that's just what you thought, and you just thought they would know. We Lee and I, there's times where in our past we would be a little flirty or a little playful as husband and wife in the kitchen when we had kids at home, and I'd think, man, tonight's the night, baby, this is going to be it. And then she would go to bed and go to sleep, and I would get up and I'd be aggravated going, what happened? I thought, and then she would go, you didn't tell me. I had no clue that you were interested in being in sex last night, And I said, well, what do you think was going on in the kitchen? And she said, well, I thought we were having fun and flirting. But, there's so many things you can do in a relationship that where you just expect your partner or your spouse to do this, and you don't communicate with them, and then you're frustrated. Yeah, unmet expectations are one of the most frustrating things in marriage. And those are things that just have to stop in relationships where you just expect, well, I expected him to say thank you, or I expected her to do this. If it's one of those things that you just expect, that's not, you're going to have to open your mouth and do a little bit of communicating.
And I think sex in particular is something that a lot of guys expect. They expect it on a certain level of frequency, but then the guy won't actually make the move and initiate it because he's kind of like waiting for her to do it, that she's going to like say, yeah, because like he wants the validation from it, and
Sure.
He doesn't get it, and then he gets resentful, and it can create a negative cycle because he's moody the next day.
Sure, absolutely. And in marriage, that is a very common thing where you just, for a spouse that has a higher sex drive, they may be over here just going, hey, I'm ready anytime, just let me know. I'm waiting for you to initiate. And the other spouse may be over there going, well, I didn't know you were in the mood. And it's one of those things to where, in a healthy relationship, in a healthy marriage, both a husband and a wife both mutually initiate the same. I mean, it's you let your spouse know, I am interested. I would love to be intimate with you 4 times a week. And your spouse goes, that sounds great. And you just kind of know, hey, it's been a few days and I guess it's my turn or something. But you understand where I'm coming from. You can't, if you have one spouse that does all the initiating, they'll wind up feeling like they're begging. And nobody wants to feel like they're begging for sex or for intimacy.
What is the healthy amount of time that you should be having sex per week?
I think that is all dependent upon the couple. I think the key, and this is huge, and I know, again, I'm speaking from a marriage perspective, but the key is it has got to be a mutual agreement between both parties, meaning the lower sex drive spouse shouldn't be the one that gets to say it's this many times. It should be a mutual agreement. So then again, if you've got the higher sex drive, and can I just throw this out because I think this is a really good, 25% of all marriages, a wife has a higher sex drive than her husband does. So not, so many men go, there's no such thing with a wife with a higher sex drive. About 25% of the time, 1 out of 4. But back to what I was saying, you come into a marriage and you go, hey, I just really think 3 times a week, maybe the lower sex drive spouse says 1 time a week is loads for me. And so you agree to 2 times a week. And I know that it's not hey, we're looking at twice. Sometimes it may be 3 times a week. Sometimes it may be 1 time a week, but it's not in a lot of marriages that are not healthy, it is the lower sex drive spouse that is the gatekeeper to how often it happens. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be a mutual consent between both the higher sex drive and the lower sex drive on how often that happens. For some couples, we meet couples sometimes that go, hey, we need 4 or 5 times a week. We meet some couples that go 4 or 5 times a year. For both of us is fine. But as long as both parties are content with that, I don't know that there's a right. Statistically, the average is 2.5, which makes me laugh because I don't know how you have 2.5 sex per week. Somebody's having fun and the other's not having a lot of fun on the 0.5. But the average is 2 to 3 times a week is kind of what the average in married couples. But we feel like if you want to have more sex, you set your own average as a couple. You may want more, you may want less. If you're content with less, fantastic. You don't have to live up to anybody's standards, but it should be a mutual agreement between both parties and not a lower sex drive sets the amount.
What do you think about the idea of, because it's very like unsexy to people to hear about the idea of scheduling sex.
Sure.
Do you think though that it's a practical, effective solution?
We personally do. We like it. Now, our idea of scheduling sex, don't get me wrong, is not saying next Tuesday at 7. When we're talking scheduling sex, we're talking, there's a lot of times where my wife will go, it's been 2 or 3 days. We have been busy. Tomorrow night, we don't have any plans. Don't put anything on the calendar. And I'll know what she means. And scheduled sex has just happened tomorrow night. Right. And so we do that. Now, we know couples that we have a really close couple that we're friends with. They say no matter what kind of week they've had, every Sunday night is their time, no matter what. That is just their time. They could have been intimate 4 times that week already. They could have been intimate no times that week, but every Sunday night, they just kind of know that's our time. They've done that since they were married. I think it's a great idea. And couples who go, man, scheduling sex just doesn't sound very sexy. Can I just say that scheduling sex like we're talking about here is a lot sexier than no sex at all, because you're too busy to put it on a calendar. Scheduled sex is better than no sex. And so if it's been a while and you're looking at your spouse and you go, hey, we don't actually have anything on our calendar on Thursday, go ahead on Tuesday and go, hey, if we don't have plans, let's, and for women, this is really healthy. Lee would tell you that women, a lot of times they have to get their mind right, meaning it's a very big mental game for women, sex is. And so for men, that's not always the case, but for women it is. And so a lot of times this is very helpful for a woman to know, hey, tomorrow night we've got plans. And so she prepares all day mentally. We find ourselves kind of more flirty, more text messages. So yeah, I would say there's something to scheduling sex, but not the sex that goes next Thursday at 2:00. Put that on your schedule. We're not talking that kind of sex.
Right. But what do you think about the idea of momentum with sex? This idea, because there's people. Okay, I have a lower sex drive. I don't want sex that much. Maybe I only want it once a month, right? But how much is that just because they're not? If you don't have sex, you kind of maybe don't. So a lot of people, if they don't have sex, they don't necessarily want to have it. So if there's some level of forcing, like, well, we're going to do it, let's say we're going to for a month do it every day, does it shift their sex drive in a different direction?
I think there is definitely something to regular sex. In fact, having sex, because of the things that we mentioned earlier, the dopamine releases, the oxytocin releases. When you've had sex, it makes you interested in more sex. And so it's easy sometimes to realize, it's been a while since we've been intimate, and I haven't actually missed it. And then when you're intimate with your spouse, it's kind of like, wow, this is good stuff. Where's this been all my life? In fact, we often talk about how that oxytocin that's released, it's that reconnector, that there are times in our relationship, we've noticed it, where we've gone for a few days and we both are kind of, annoyed with one another, or we kind of are putting up with one another, and we love each other. We just don't like each other really well. And then we realize, it's been a while since we've been intimate. And then we are, and then all of a sudden it's like we reconnect, and I'm like, this is my wife. I like her again, or this is my husband and this is my man. And it's just, there is something to that. Some folks call it maintenance sex, where oftentimes in marriage, you have a couple that go, hey, it's been a week or whatever it is, and we need to be intimate because we're not connected like we should. If that works for your marriage, we're all for it. If that's something that sounds weird to you, don't do it. It works pretty good for us.
How do kids change the dynamic, especially when it comes to sex? What is the do like, because I don't even just mean from the sense of obviously you have more responsibilities and it takes up more time, but how do women change when they become a mother?
It is a natural instinct for women and for men, but especially women. It's just built in them to put on that mama hat and become that mama, and oftentimes forget, hey, I wear another hat as well, and that's a wife hat. And women sometimes have to work really hard, and men, there's a lot of men do too, to remind themselves, I need to take off my mom hat, my dad hat, and put back on my husband wife hat, because we also have a marriage in this house and not just a mom and dad in this house. Kids can be very stressful on a marriage. We're that couple that will tell you, hey, if you're having a few marriage problems and you're thinking that having a kid is going to fix a bunch of stuff in your marriage, it's going to make things worse. Because kids are going to put stress on a marriage, and they're going to put stress on a sex life, and you're going to have to work really hard to continue to be husband and a wife when you have small, especially multiple little ones, because sometimes putting little ones down at night, if you got more than one, it's like that whack-a-mole game. You get one down, one pops up, and you're kind of like, well, I thought we were going to get some time, and when that finally does happen, and that's where that scheduling sex kind of can come in. Hey, tonight, let's try to get the kids down early. We're big believers in putting a lock on your bedroom door, not so you just lock the kids out, but so that if one does get up, you don't have to worry about them barging in. And that, again, helps that a lot of times that wife or that woman who it's a mental game, who is worried about, are the kids awake? Are they down good? If the door's locked, that helps a whole lot. Those are just little things that are very helpful in long-term relationships to know. But it requires a little bit of work. It takes being intentional. It isn't gonna, if you just think it's gonna happen, no, you're gonna have to be intentional with sex when little ones come along, and be patient during that time, because there'll be some times of some struggle.
Mm, mm. Does a woman's sex drive change as she gets older in general? Do you find that that's like kind of like something that's pushed out a lot in sort of the mainstream, that as a woman gets towards her late 30s, 40s, that her sex drive really shoots up? Is
It's
that
true.
it is
It
true?
is. It
Yeah.
is true. There's a peak in a woman's sex drive. Late 40s, early 50s goes up, and then it kind of goes back where it was. Generally speaking, again, I mentioned earlier, some marriages, 1 out of 4 marriages, wife has a higher sex drive than her husband does. But generally, most of the time, a husband has a much higher sex drive, and it generally stays way up there unless there is some health problems or some emotional problems or something, to where some testosterone issues come along or something like that. And so, but yeah, there is a peak in a woman's sex drive, late 40s, early 50s, somewhere in there. I don't know why it is. It's how God made women, I guess.
Mm. And so here's a more controversial topic. So what about infidelity in marriage? Is a marriage salvageable? Should it be salvaged if there's been infidelity?
Well, I'm a believer until death do us part, but that's not always the case. I also don't encourage anyone to put up with abuse or infidelity, or especially multiple infidelities.
Mm-hmm.
That, can a marriage survive? Absolutely. In fact, we personally know some fantastic marriages who have worked through infidelity, and both the husband and the wife have said, let's go to work and let's save this marriage. And because both of them were willing to do that, they have built a fantastic marriage, just an incredible marriage. It takes both parties, and it takes some rules. There's some things that's going to have to change when there's been infidelity. There's got to be, this third party's got to be cut off 100%. There's going to have to be some checks and balances from here on out, but it can be done and it can be saved. But I'm not going to be the guy that tells the the person who's been cheated on multiple times. You need to be trying to make this work. You know, there are times where it's like, you need to get out. There's a lot better people out there than what you're married to right now.
Yeah, there's I was on a panel a few months ago, and it was like a really hardcore like red pill, black pill panel. And I made mention at one point because they were talking about infidelity. And I said, like, there's a 10%, like maybe in 10% of marriages where infidelity occurs, it actually ends up being a catalyzing moment for the relationship because it kind of wakes everybody up, the fact that this relationship isn't working. And both parties, you know, take a level of responsibility for where it got there, and then they really actually work to coming together, and that it can actually be a cause of the relationship getting to the next level. Of course, like fucking piss off everybody there. You know, you're supporting. No, I'm not supporting it. And I would say that that's uncommon. I don't think it's the norm. But
I agree, but it can't. But you're right. There sometimes bumps in the road where both couples go, we're going to lose this marriage and let both people. We're going to lose this marriage unless we pick it up. Man, they can build an incredible marriage.
Yeah, and I mean, as a general rule, it's bumps in the road that actually allow you to go to the higher levels. I mean, if you hit no rough areas, you're not realizing why you're not moving smoothly. So it's like the two things, you can't have one without the other. Obviously, infidelity is one that you hope that you can avoid because it brings with it a particular set of trust issues. I think it's even worse than neglect.
Agreed.
So it's like you're if the relationship was hard to fix before, maybe you made it a little bit harder. But yeah, I think I think a lot of people today with relationships, they want it to be just easy and automatic. Like they want everything in life to be easy and automatic. And the fact that you're going to go through some speed bumps, that maybe there's a period of time in the relationship where, there's problems with sex, maybe there's problems with the two of you connecting. They don't want to deal with that because it brings up too much pain. It brings up all of this deep-seated pain, feeling of worthiness. And so they're like, I'd rather just, either be by myself or keep people at arm's length or meet someone new. And I think what they don't realize is that is really where the growth comes from. That's how you get shaped as a man.
That's it. You're right. And that's how your body works. Man, if I want to get in shape and I want my body to be at its best, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to break down muscle tissue and I'm going to work to build a good, and there are going to be times where I've been injured, and it's frustrating. And yet during that time of downtime, it's a time for other body parts to rest or for me to re-educate myself on what I did wrong. You just can't have any relationship that's smooth and doesn't require effort. Anything of worth is always going to require effort. And you don't go to bed one night going, I think tomorrow I want to be in shape and I want to be muscular, and you wake up and you're that. It just doesn't work that way. You don't go to bed going, I want a great marriage, and you wake up and it's there. It is going to require effort and works and peaks and valleys. Relationships are just not those things. One of the things so many people do, whether it's long-term relationship, dating relationship, marriages, is they check out when they hit the first few little speed bumps. There's a 7-year divorce peak and everybody kind of knows, boy, 7 years is tough. But man, if Lee and I would have given up in all the tough times, we would be enjoying the times that we have today. I am so glad that we didn't bail out when things got hard, because there have been times it's gotten really, really hard. But you can't have good times unless you work through them hard times in whatever relationship you're in. And so, that's just one of those things that too many people just kind of think, hey, it ought to be smooth and there should be no bumps in the road. And people don't work that way.
Why do you think it's so difficult for guys to accept this? Like, for instance, in the broader manosphere, and maybe you're not quite as like tapped in with it, but in the broader manosphere, people, when it comes to making money, they understand, oh yeah, you can't listen to average people. You have to, they're all about trying to make their own money and etc. Right? And then when it comes to the gym, they understand that you have to take responsibility for your health. You got to exercise, and there is this focus, this understanding that you gotta like there's work involved to get there. You're not gonna get the 6-pack abs unless you skip out on the dessert. But what is it about the relationships where that logic just goes right out the window? Is it that they have to rely on somebody else and that makes them uncomfortable? They have to trust somebody else and that makes them uncomfortable?
That's very possible, and I don't know what it is, but if it's what keeps us in business, and we're not really in business, but I mean, it's just kind of like people. You read through our social media, and we just, I mean, that's what we teach. It's what we talk. Is it doesn't happen by accident. You got to be intentional. But for some reason, people think relationships should be easy, whether it's TV, whether it's movies, and watching movies where everything just, Hallmark movies where everything is perfect, nothing ever goes wrong. I don't know what it is, but for some reason we think relationships are just those things that they just ought to work, and you're trying to take two very different people and connect them together in a relationship, and they don't line up, they don't connect, and people get frustrated. Instead of trying to fix that, they move on to the next relationship, and it's going to happen the same way. But yeah, that's where we need coaching, and men, specifically men, but also women, because again, men aren't as relational as women are. Men need to step up and go, I need to educate myself on how to do relationships, and how to be a man who is willing to be a little vulnerable. And I hate that word, to communicate a little bit better, and to be someone who can learn how to do relationships, because I don't know how. I wish I knew how to get that message across to guys, but generally that takes place when their significant other has checked out and finally said, I've had all I can put up with. And then they're like, all right, teach me, what do I need to do? And so many times, sadly, we have to go, it's too late.
Yeah.
You should have been doing something a year ago when they were asking. Now is not the time to step up and go, I'm ready to change my life. Change your life, but I don't know if you're going to get back what you had because you waited so long. Don't be that guy. Man, we meet those guys all the time who have waited until the last minute to go, okay, I need to make some changes. And they can't figure out why their spouse has given up when they have been, that spouse, that significant other has been for years begging for, let's make some changes.
So what are some practical things that guys can do if they find themselves in this situation, their marriage, their relationship is on the rocks, woman's 1 foot out the door? What are some practical things that the guy can do to fix the relationship? It's obviously going to take a lot of humility, but there is a certain also, if he's just becomes weak all of a sudden after being intransigent, then it's also going to push the woman away. So what do you do in workshops to help couples going through this?
Well, one of the things that men need to do is if we're talking to that audience, is understand that it's probably taken you a little while to mess this relationship up, and you're not going to be able to just flip a switch and tomorrow it'd be better. It's going to take a little time to fix it, and so you're going to have to be patient, and you're not going to want to be patient, but you're going to have to be patient. There are so many resources out there. It's ridiculous the amount of resources that are available to couples in relationships on how to better. There are books on every topic, amazing marriage books, amazing books on how to be a man and what to, just written solely for men. There are podcasts, free podcasts that you could listen to find out, how can I be a better man? How can I be a better husband? How can I be a better boyfriend? There are so many things. Educate yourself. Um, seek some therapy, find a mentor, somebody that has been successful in this, and say, what can I do? What do I need to do? But one of the best things, if you're a man and your significant other has said, hey, I think we're done. Of course, the best thing for you to do is, say, I am really sorry I've not stepped up before now, and I will do anything to help save our relationship. But the best thing you can do is go back to do the things. What was it that caused her to fall in love with you in the first place? What was it early in the relationship that she loved about you? Well, I'm going to guess you spent time with her, and you probably sent sweet text messages to her. You probably sent her flowers. You probably, for no reason at all, did little things for her, to whether it was fill up a car with gas or take her car and get it washed or cleaned for her. Little things are really big things, and start looking back. What were the things that we did early in our relationship that we're not currently doing? And that's where I would start, is those things that she fell in love with you. Visited with a girl the other day. She was frustrated. They've been married 3 years, and he goes, I don't even know why we're here. And she said, it has been 4 years since you have sent me flowers. Remember, she said, do you remember the last time you sent me flowers? And he said, he couldn't. She said, before we got married, you sent them all the time. When you proposed to me, you had like a dozen red roses, all petals everywhere, where I had to walk down all these flowers, where you knelt down and asked me to marry you. 4 years later, you have yet to send me flowers one time. And he didn't get the fact that she fell in love with a guy who had sent her flowers and had written her notes and took her on dates. And he was just trying to win her. And he thought, man, I'll check that off the list. She's mine. And she was over here going, I want my old guy back.
Yeah.
And if I can't have him back, I don't want you, because you're not who I married. And he didn't realize, I've still got to pursue her, and I've still got to chase her, that she wants to be pursued, and she still wants a sweet note every now and then, and she still wants a flower. Pick it on the side of the road. It doesn't have to be a dozen red roses. Something to say, I was thinking about you today. But as men, we get pretty lazy in them relationships, and thinking that, hey, I got them, I don't have to work to keep them anymore. And she still wants to be pursued.
What do you think about the love languages? 'Cause it sounds like that woman's gifts, right?
It
Sounds like,
is.
yeah.
I'm a big fan of the love language, the Gary Chapman stuff. Love languages are huge, and when we figured out in our relationship, kind of the love language we speak, it made a world of difference. And that guy that I was telling you about, he fell in love with a girl whose love languages was gifts, and being affectionate. And he spoke that love language so well. And then he got married 3 years and hadn't spoke it at all. And she was going, where, and once he realizes, oh, so this is how she feels loved, he can go back to doing those things. Lee's love language, my wife's love language is acts of service. Mine is touch. And so when you learn your significant other's love language, it really makes the relationship work really well, because now you understand what makes them feel loved, and you're willing to do those little things.
So when you're trying to fix a relationship, I mean, you mentioned that you got to be patient. Does it get worse before it gets better?
At times it does. You're going to have to be patient. There are times it'll get worse before it gets better. Men are the worst about going, hey, I apologized. I really thought we'd get up today and everything would be fine. Sometimes it may have taken you 6 months to mess this marriage up or this relationship up, and it may take you 3 or 4 months of trying to work hard to get it turned back around. And you're just going to have to be patient. There's going to be, you may take a couple of steps back before you take a step forward, but you keep working on it until either she's checked out and said, no, we're done, or you keep working on it. But yeah, the worst thing is to just go, well, I don't, I apologize, and I don't know why things are better. If you've messed it up, it takes a little while to fix it. So be patient and go to work on it.
Yeah, and I'd also say that what tends to happen is when you're you know, she's wanted behavior changes from you. She's wanted you to treat her better. And so you don't do that. Let's just say you haven't been doing that. Now you start doing it. She doesn't trust it. And so in the beginning, when you start to, you know, maybe this client, he brings her flowers, she, you know, there might be some level of like, well, what's the agenda here?
Sure.
And there's maybe a stronger pushback,
Sure.
or at least not any kind of acknowledgement of it, just because, yeah, there's no trust. And so she'll push and push and push, and just to see, does he really care? Is he really going to start to do these things? And I think that's especially the case for women who are in more of like a fearful kind of attachment dynamic, because the trust is really what's freaking them out. It's not that they just want the behavioral change. They're at the point where they're actually afraid that the person that they're with is not really caring about them.
Yeah. And you're right. And that is the case. Some man who has told his wife, I've changed this time, I'll do better. Maybe he's told her for the last 2 years, I'll do better, and he hasn't done better. And she finally decides, I'm checking out, or, something's got to change. And he goes, I'll do better. Well, you've told me that 3 times now. And what makes this different than any other time? And so you're going to have to be consistent. You're going to have to do better, but continue to do better, and not do better for a week and then go back to whatever bad habit you were into, or, do better, make that change.
Yeah, and I think one of the really big problems that guys get themselves into is that, you know, especially the very logical thinking mind, is that they're thinking, well, if I do this behavior, if I do X thing, then I'm going to get this response. And they look at it in that sort of, you know, logical sequencing. And what they're often doing is they're trying to act upon the girl. They're trying to basically create a behavioral response from her, rather than actually connecting with her, rather than doing these things because they actually feel like they love this woman. And I think, you know, for guys who maybe were able to manufacture that a bit with game, like I think what happens is that guys learn some of the stuff, they run game, so to speak, on a girl. The girl responds to them, and then they find themselves developing feelings for the girl because of how she's responding to him. But they never actually learn how to connect to her. So they might fall for her, but they don't connect with her, really. They thought that they were connecting because she was, you know, caring about him when he was doing these little, you know, pinging on her behavior. The relationship starts to decline because eventually he gets revealed. The connection between them breaks down, but he's trying to fix the relationship, but all he's doing is still trying to find new ways to ping. Like, it's like that whole strategy no longer works. You have to take a completely different approach, and I think this is where we get a lot of this humbling yourself and opening up about how you actually feel, and trusting. I mean, this is the difficult thing, having the trust that if you actually do let down that wall, is she still going to be there?
Yeah. Now, you said it right, and you nailed it on the head, and that's exactly the way it is. And you get a guy who's in a relationship, and he gets in the doghouse and he thinks, well, I'll bring flowers and that'll fix things, or I will, get a gift certificate for her here, and that'll make her happy. And after a while, what takes place is you can't buy the flowers, you can't get the gift certificate enough for things to reconnect, and you've got to look for a different method. You want to do the relationship right. You bring the flowers, you buy the gift certificate, whatever it is you're doing, because you like them, not because you want something from them. When you're doing it because I want to connect with this person, and I love them, I want to get to know them better. This might be the one. You do things for them not because you're trying to get something out of it, but because I like them. I want to do something for them, and that makes the relationship a whole lot better than the what can I do to get something that I want.
Yeah, it comes down to intention. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of guys mean well, but they don't actually understand their own intention. You know, they might say, well, yeah, of course I want to have a great relationship, but they don't, their intention is not to really open their heart, though, in the moment. And that's So before we wrap up here, Trey, I just wanted to ask, what has been, maybe this is something that you found that works really well with couples or that's worked in your own marriage. What is is there any sort of like magic weapon, some sort of thing that you do and that by doing this, like the relationship stays strong or brings it on a great course or supercharges it? Like, for instance, Tyler Tote, one of the things, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but one of the things that he always talks about is like date night once a week. Like he does that. You can't, non-negotiable. They have to have a date night without the kids once a week. So what's something that you found?
Well, I don't want to build off of him, but it's being intentional. You're going to have to put in the effort. That date night once a week is going to have to be a necessity. Don't make it any more than 2 weeks. You're going to have to continue to do things. Find out from your significant other, what is it that they like. If they like to hold hands, I'm going to hold hands. If they like little gifts, I'm going to pick up her favorite candy bar. I'm going to find out what her favorite candy bar is, and I'm going to buy it and bring it for no reason whatsoever. I'm going to find out what her favorite drink is at Sonic, figure out and show up at her workplace. So there's no, the magic is the little stuff. The little stuff is the big stuff. And so when you do the little stuff, when you send the text message that just goes, man, I was thinking about you, just wanted to tell you that I hope your day is going well. That stuff, you may think that's just really no big deal, but that's huge. Those are the big things. Saying thank you for things that they ought to do, things that are just routine in a relationship where, well, they've always done this. It doesn't matter if they've always done it. Tell them thank you for it, because they don't have to do it. Don't take for granted the person you're in a relationship with. Man, we live in a place where I have mowed the lawn for 30 something years in my marriage. I'm not sure my wife has ever started a lawnmower. That is the last thing she would ever want to do, is go mow grass. And I have taken care of our yards. And yet every time I have ever come in from doing the lawns, she always takes time to go, yards look great. Thank you for doing that. It was hot today and I appreciate you. And I'm always like, wow, the fact that she should just think he should automatically do it. That's what he does while I'm in here doing whatever it is that I'm doing. But she always takes a second to say thank you for doing things that I'm supposed to do. Little things make the big difference in the relationship.
Reinforce what you want to see continue.
Yep, yeah. That's exactly right.
So, Trey, tell the audience, where they can find you. I mean, you said you're booked 3 years out, but I mean, certainly you have to have some openings for people if they want to do a workshop with you.
Well, you can find us at treyandlea.com, which is TREYANDLEA.com, or you could just Google. I promise it'll pull up our site.
I'll have the link below for everybody.
There you go. All right. You can find where our workshops are going to be. You can find our podcast. You can find our social media links of Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of those places. You'll find a place on there. You can message us if you want to ask a question or tell me I'm an idiot. Either one, I'm good with that. I can handle it. But, that's where you find us. You'll find a couple of links to our books that we do. We're doing a marriage cruise in January. We're empty nesters now, so that's pretty awesome. And so we can do things like marriage cruises. We got about 100 signed up for to go on a cruise with us. And we're going to spend a couple of days while we're at sea doing some marriage classes on how to be better husbands and better wives and how to do relationships better. And yeah, it's pretty fun stuff. And so as long as people will keep listening to what we're saying, we're going to keep saying it.
Living the life. I love it.
That's it, man. I like it.
Well, Trey, thank you so much for coming on.
Pat, absolutely honored. Thank you for having me today, my friend.
I'll see you on Twitter.